All right, welcome back to the arena and the boardroom. So tonight, this is Sunday night, getting this recorded in advance for tomorrow, Monday, the 23rd of October. I've got a little project that I'm working on, not related to school and not related to work. In fact, this is something that I came up with, floated to somebody working in a different organization, just as a general suggestion, and they're rolling with it. And not only are they rolling with it, there's actual traction that this project itself could go somewhere. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what their issues are, their concerns are, what I pitched just as a general concept, and really just kind of how this thing could move forward in the future. So as always, before we want to get started, drink of the episode, I've got a smoothie mixed berry that is in the description of the episode. Really good, and not originally how this idea formed, but Sunday night I wasn't going to dive too deep into anything that was going to mess me up for tomorrow. So, okay, this project with an outside organization. So I'm not getting paid for this. The person who I floated this to is just a friend, and we bounce ideas off of each other, and they tend to have a little bit of influence in the area that they're at. So sometimes things like this can move forward. So not consulting. I don't even think the organization knows that I exist, but here we are, and I am passively kind of workshopping this thing with them as they put together a proposal to fix what they consider to be a relatively high issue within their organization. So what is that issue? My specialty, as I'm studying and what I want to focus on going forward, strictly lies in personnel. So the problem that they were outlining to me, and this was a couple months ago, was they have issues with quality of candidate and then retention of quality individuals, quality employees. Now, both of those things represent different issues that are related. When it comes to quality of candidate, I often look at this in a couple of ways, but mainly you are what you project, right? So if you don't project yourself of value, if you don't project yourself as something that provides value, you're not going to attract people that want either of those things. You're not going to attract people that value themselves, and you're not going to attract people that want to provide value in the work that they do. Now, what this organization struggles with as a nonprofit, sometimes nonprofits pay like nonprofits, especially at the entry-level positions. So the issue specifically with this aspect of their personnel is that they're paying $16 an hour, and they're offering people 40 hours a week, which comes out to about $640. Now, money is one component. I mean, it's the primary component of why we work. None of us work for free. But money doesn't always equate to quality unless there are other factors with it. But in this case, it is playing a bit of a role because the work that they do can be relatively difficult and it can be taxing. So that moves us into retention. There are enough people who are out there that need to work, that want to work. People will always find you, right? But they need a reason to stay. Organizations themselves, you're going to luck into some really good employees, those A-level staff, right? But a lot of the times those A-level staff that you have are working for C and B-level staff, and they're going to get frustrated and they're going to leave. If you just pair that now with a much more willingness that people in general have to leave situations that are not advantageous to them, you now have a problem. But when you look at this, there's a lot of good employees out there. I consider myself a good employee. I work with really good employees. And if you read the article that I wrote a couple weeks ago, that everybody is for sale, that holds true. People want their value to consistently be validated. And they want to be able to work in an environment where they feel like there's a little bit of growth and they are actually contributing to the success of the whole. So again, retention, quality of candidate, both of those are issues that are related to each other, that are creating separate problems, that are creating one giant problem for this organization as a whole. So what's the model? So when I was talking with my friend, $16 an hour for 40 a week, it's not a whole lot of money for the staff, but also you have to pay benefits on top of that as an organization. So not only are you not paying people a ton of money, they're probably not taking those benefits, but you have to keep those benefits on your books in the event that they would take benefits as they are entitled to as a full-time staff. With this model, though, when you've got a bunch of full-time staff, you lack depth. And this is something that I had when I was at the YMCA in my previous role, is we had, 128 hours for our staffing budget. And I had 2 full-time staffers at 40 hours each. So pretty much 2/3 of what we had was gone. And it didn't leave you a whole lot of room to build around your key assets. Now, their ratio of full-time to part-time is currently 3-to-1. And I think that's a way out of balance ratio. You don't need that many full-time staff when you're in the industry that they're in. And I think that that could be balanced out a little bit better, really, in any medium. I wouldn't want to be that one-sided if I could avoid it, especially when you look back at what I said previously. Not only are you paying full-time hours, you also have to pay for the benefits that are on the books in case those individuals want to take them. And again, at $16 an hour, you're not really going to get a whole lot of people who are incentivized to take those benefits. So you've got those two things, lack of retention and poor quality of candidate, in addition to what you already have as issues with your current models. So you've recognized those last two things as the key issues that are preventing you from moving forward. So now, why is this the episode that I'm doing? I want to protect my idea. Selfishly, I wasn't going to get credit anyway. But in the event that I did get some credit, or they just kind of ran away with it, I at least want to have the solace that I created this and I put it out there. So some of this is ego driven. Also, it's fun to explore models and share them. Sometimes when you come up with something, although I don't necessarily think this is that groundbreaking, it's good to share it, because you never know who else may benefit from utilizing this particular model, or taking this model and revamping it and retrofitting it to what they are doing within their organization. Again, I don't believe knowledge should be safeguarded. I think it should be shared, and not everything has to have a price tag to it. Something like this, I believe, not only would be helpful to this particular organization, but similar models could be helpful to other organizations as well. Okay, what is this model? So it's funny, because every time we have a conversation, I'm more and more surprised that it's advancing the way that it is, because I really didn't think it was that groundbreaking of an idea when I came up with it. It seemed like a simple solution to a problem that they were having. But hey, if they think it's that great and they want to treat it as such, more power to them. I just thought it was a really common practice, an idea that you could just reshape your personnel. And also, it came to me after I'd had a really large glass of wine when I was in New York with my mom back in August. And all of a sudden, this is the idea that came together. And similar to when I was a coach, when I was watching film or anything of the sorts, I would text players randomly about something that we could try at practice. I texted my friend this in the dead of night, that this was an idea that we could potentially test out. And he was all for it. So that's really where the beginning of it started. But the model itself is rooted in an athletic mindset to build depth by increasing your workforce so that you've got more people to satisfy the functions of the job. Essentially, you would get rid of a lot of the full-time and go part-time. So you would go from, say, 40 hours to 20 hours. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about slashing jobs. I'm not interested in just cutting people's hours, cutting jobs just for the sake of saving money, because that is often what happens when people make decisions with personnel. That is the most expensive asset that you have, and it's always easier to save money by trimming it down. But when you look at it in this case, there are going to be a lot of tangible benefits, not just for the organization, but really for the employees that we bring in as well. So that's going to be the first thing. Let's get rid of the 3-to-1 full-time to part-time ratio and break that down a little bit. We would increase the potential quality of the workforce by paying more. So this is theoretical, but you would go from $16 an hour to $24 an hour, which is a substantial jump. But when you think about it, if you're cutting the hours in half from 40 to 20, that will balance itself out just a little bit. So we'll think about that there. Hold on that. And then you're going to create some flexibility. Again, going back to that idea of having depth, having bodies. In any sports team, your starters are your most high value assets, but your backups, bench players, role players are going to probably be your most vital assets because they spell your starters. If one of your starters gets hurt, having good depth behind them, people that know the system, that can perform at a reasonably high level until your starters get back, this all matters. So you have a little flexibility to cover some more of those spots. You could potentially decrease burnout by having more coverage, and because you have a little bit better pay in theory, you would be increasing the quality of the candidate. So let's break down the numbers a little bit. $16 an hour for 40 hours a week. That's about $640 a week, which does not include PTO or benefits. So we're just kind of keeping that right there. In this new model, $24 an hour at 20 hours a week equals $480 a week, no benefits or PTO needed. So if you're just looking at those numbers in a vacuum, which don't do that, you are saving, what, $160? Yes, $160. Wasn't great at math. I can do a lot of things. Math isn't one of them. But you're also cutting full-time to part-time. So you are cutting production in half, and you're doing it by eliminating a full-time and just putting one part-time. That math doesn't add up. So you go 2 for 1. You do 960. So 480, 480, that is 960. You go for a 2 for 1 staff, which is $320 more, but no benefits, no PTO, and you've got bodies that can cover this whole thing. Now, this organization also has a hiring bonus, which problematic because once the hiring bonus gets paid out, a lot of these staff do end up leaving, and that's a lot of money that you're spending really for 3 to 6 months of production only. And there's a lot of money that gets tied into that. So with something like this, if you're paying a little bit more, you could also get rid of the hiring bonus. So with the numbers itself, you've done a couple of things. You've gotten rid of PTO and benefits, which again, I am not against. I want to make that perfectly clear. I'm not in the business of wanting to shortchange people's benefits. But in this case, it's not even needed, especially when you've got younger staff who might be able to be on their parents' insurance up until they're 26. So they're not taking any of the benefits. They're getting PTO, that's fine. But the main core, the insurance benefits that you have to keep on the books, not worth it for them because they're not taking it, and not worth it for the organization because you have to keep it on your books. And even if they really did think about taking it at $16 an hour, you're not taking home that much money anyway after taxes. Benefits will cut into that further. So really stressing here that the benefits angle of things, you want to try to get rid of that off of your books. But again, with this organization and their hiring bonus, if you're hiring a bunch of people and you no longer have to pay that out, you're just going to pay people more. So however the numbers would work out, and I'm not in their books, I'm just going off of some generalities here, there is savings. There's savings from the benefit side and from the hiring bonus side. So that kind of tails us into what some of those benefits would be. So if you did this on a mass scale, let's say you implemented this in one of their programs or one of their departments, you instantly have more people, 2 for 1, right? So 2 for 1, and you're covering really the same amount, but you're doing it with 2 people. So in theory, with this at 24 an hour, you could have better candidates. That's the thought. You can be pickier at 24 an hour, and it should expand the pool of people because just based off of the preliminary research I did, there's nobody in their industry that's paying 24 an hour for the positions that they would be looking to do that for. So it would pop off the screen. Again, going back, you save money. Benefits come off the book, and at 16 an hour, you are disincentivized to take them. And you would not need to keep paying out hiring bonuses if you start people in at a higher rate. This is where it starts to get really good, though, for the staff that you would be bringing in or that who would sign on to this. Flexibility for the staff and a little bit easier of a commitment. So I'm one of those staff. I prioritize my life outside of work, flexibility, being able to navigate the world, other stuff, which is one of the perks of working remotely. You get somebody in at 20 hours a week, that offers you the chance as a worker to maybe pick up another part-time job, to maybe do school if you're in grad school or if you're in undergrad. If you've got hobbies or things that you want to do, maybe you just only have a threshold for 20 hours a week and you can make it work financially. This gives you flexibility to do what you need to do. And if you're running into issues with a lot of staff who might be taking a lot of time off, who are pick a reason, pick any reason of why you might be shortchanged on staff. This flexibility, in addition to having more people, gives you a chance to cover it and also gives those staff a chance to work their way in. And that easier commitment, think about how daunting it can be if you are going into an entry-level spot. Maybe it's your first job, or maybe it's a brand new industry that you are unfamiliar with, and suddenly you are tasked with doing 40 hours worth of full-time work because they need you to. It sounds great to have a full-time job, but maybe that's not what's setting your staff for the best method of success. So this at 20 hours a week, this part-time, gives you the chance to ease people in, and it creates flexibility on both sides, organizational and staff. It could also create more opportunities for collaboration and gap coverage. So we talked about burnout. This organization, their staff suffers from a lot of high burnout. You've got salaried staff working a ton of hours who are struggling to keep up, and you've got newer staff also struggling to keep up because of the workload. So more people means more ways to divvy up the work, more ways to collaborate about the work, and more ways to cover some of those gaps if people do need to call off. Again, this is about building depth and about creating a way that allows for an organization to function a little bit smoother and for the staff to work a little bit more efficiently. That decreased workload kind of ties into that, because when you've got a lot of salaried staff, who I'm salaried, sometimes you work 30 hours, sometimes you work 50 hours. It can be sometimes grueling because you're not on a specific clock. You're just expected to get your work done. Having more people, again, would allow you to delegate some of those tasks. So really, for that salaried staff who are working to the wick, this could be helpful. Going back to the staff. The staff really could end up making a whole lot more money. So when we go back to the numbers, that's 16 for 40, that's 640, 24 to 20, that's 480. So not that much of a difference there. But for this organization itself, their full-time threshold, I believe they said, was 30 hours. So I had to play with the numbers a bit. You would want to be safe, give yourself a little bit of wiggle room, and say that that staff, those part-time staff that were doing the 20 hours, could go up to 28. So if you're looking at what 28 hours could look like under this model, 28 times 24, that's 672. So already that staff is making more than they would as a full-time staff. And if they wanted to just stick at that 20 hours a week, 24 by 20, you got that 480. If they were to pick up another part-time job, 16 an hour for 20 hours, so if they found another job that met the same old threshold, they're making 800 a week. So there's tangible benefits in here for the staff to accept this model, not just because you're getting paid more, you've got the flexibility too. So that really does help. What I do love here is with more people, you're getting a real chance to now see where the true gaps were. And when anytime there's a place that's short-staffed, you've got people working in ways that are a lot of times in survival mode, some sloppy habits can develop and some resentment can build. And those are problems on one spectrum, but when the issues get fixed, how embedded in their old ways are they? Are these people who are going to be excited for a change and are willing to embrace all this? Or are these people who are going to impede progress because they just disagree with it and they've figured out the way that they work best and they want to move forward? People a lot of times do complain about things, but when a solution does show itself up, they don't enable the solution to take full effect. So when you get a chance to see where those gaps could be, you could trim down the fat of some of the people who are in your organization who weren't pulling their weight when you were short-staffed and are going to continue to not pull their weight now that you've got more people. So those are where the benefits are. There's issues. As always, there's going to be potential problems with any model. This isn't flawless. You're going to have a lot more people in a model like this. And I did stress that to this individual, that more people means more variables in personality and variables in general, because you're going to have to manage a lot more bodies. What is the threshold for that? On top of that, high workload, is managing more people something that these supervisors would be able to do? That's a question for them to answer, but that's something that they would have to worry about. But again, it gives you a look at where those gaps are. Maybe somebody is a mediocre manager, and because they don't have a giant team, their flaws are covered up. But suddenly now having to juggle a lot more people, personalities, and logistics, they are going to struggle in that situation. Okay, so it could potentially help there. But that is an issue that you would have to potentially uncover. can your personnel team handle this? Talent acquisition. Can they actually implement this model successfully? So if you've got a talent um, drain, or you've got a lack of quality of candidate, that's on TA, that's on personnel, because they're the ones that are the entry point into the organization. So if you've got poor quality of candidate, that starts somewhere. And if that's all that's being brought in, that starts somewhere. So talent acquisition, personnel, they are going to have to be accountable here to actually be able to facilitate the increase, the desire for a better candidate if you're going to pay a little bit more. This, you'd probably have to create a position for this, but you would need somebody actively monitoring hours to prevent dipping into full time. So if the threshold is 30 hours within this organization to be full time, you would need somebody who's tightly monitoring those people that get into that 25, 26, 27, 28 range to make sure that they stay away from 30. And if they do dip into 30, making sure they get nowhere close to it for a couple of pay cycles, because the idea here is to not have to pay out benefits to individuals that may not want them or need them. And if you get people too close to that full-time threshold and they go over, you're going to get stuck paying them, and you're going to be paying them for a significantly more expensive staff than you would have been otherwise because you weren't managing it. It'd be a complete philosophical shift for this organization. Doesn't sound like this is something that they have ever thought about or have thought about or even considered doing. So it would be a philosophical shift. And the dangers of that are you got to get a lot of people on board that this is the right idea, and not just get people on board to do the idea, if that makes sense. So you want to get something like this going. It's going to be a whole lot more than just presenting the idea. And again, I stress that also. Changing a philosophical ideology such as this within an organization of something that might have been embedded for years is difficult. And while everything sounds great and it might make sense to me, it might make sense to this person, and it might make sense to a lot of people in the room when they present, there could be some key agents that hear some of this stuff and just think, nah, that doesn't sound like something we want to do. So that's going to be a challenge, changing the ideology and philosophy of how something like this would work within an organizational workforce. Implementation, that's always a challenge because you're going to get people that are all in for it and a bunch of people who are not as all in for it and could be lazy with the implementation, and it could potentially look like it's not working as well as it is, even if it is working. So many variables, and again, going back to the philosophical shift point, if it's implemented but implemented poorly, you might as well not implement it. I've seen plenty of really good ideas that people have made, that I've made, that have gotten all the way to the implementation phase, and then when people realize, oh shoot, this is going to require us to actually do work instead of just fixing the problem like we thought it was going to, which doesn't make any sense. All problem solving requires some work. Implementation fails, and it's viewed as a terrible idea, and it takes 5 or 10 years to even revisit something similar, or to implement a brand new idea takes even longer because they have this as a data point to say, oh, well, we tried something like this and it didn't work. When the reality is it didn't work because it was implemented poorly by people that didn't understand how to implement it or didn't care to. So that's a concern. Seeing beyond the numbers. I was very light with the numbers because I don't know all the books and the mechanics behind what this organization does. But someone's going to see a jump from 16 to 24 an hour and think there's no way we can afford that. Nope, we're not doing it. But again, look at what is happening. So then they're going to probably say, well, we're still spending more for the staff. If we do a 2-for-1, we're not doing it. Again, look beyond the numbers. If you're looking at just a numbers game, without the benefits and without the broader numbers attached to it, of course it's going to look like a plan that you wouldn't want to do. But again, just look beyond the numbers, and that's more of a dealing with a finance mindset. Finance individuals are the bane of my existence because they always look at a situation from us not having enough. I do not get along with finance people. I consider them soulless, but that's a different conversation for a different day. One last thing, just kind of staff resentment based on those numbers. So again, that's a pretty high jump. But here's one thing that's great about sports, pro sports with the contracts is, yes, you can see the numbers. And even if the numbers look like something, they base a lot of it off of per year average, per year money, right? What you're getting on an annual basis. So whereas somebody who is been working there for a while, right, getting 22 an hour, we'll just use that as a marker, 22 an hour, and they're full time and they've got that, and somebody brand new is coming in making 24 an hour in a different position, but they're brand new, could build some resentment. But again, don't focus on the number. You're at 22 an hour. You're full time. You've got benefits available to you because you wanted those, probably, right? This part-time staff, part-time, not getting as much, not having the benefits attached to them, not accruing PTO. It's different, right? The take-home money is going to be different, and the benefits are going to be different, right? So staff often looks at a lot of this in terms of what they're getting or what they're not getting in comparison to others. And while I am an advocate for salary transparency, this situation doesn't necessarily do it because there are other factors that are in play. So those two things, right? Seeing beyond the numbers as an organization, and obviously trying to get staff to see beyond the numbers as well if this is something you were going to implement. So moving ahead, as we're going to close this thing out, what to look for, some markers. So you would want to probably do this from a 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, and then if you're going to keep track of 12-month perspective. Why? You want to implement this thing in phases. You want to see if you make this change in that first month, are you getting some better quality candidates? Month 3, of those candidates, who was hired, right? How many of those candidates did you hire? You go into month 6. How many of those people have you retained? And then month 12, again, you're looking at retention metrics. So if your problem is quality of candidate, you want to look at those first 3 months of really, has the quality of candidate in shoes versus where you were at. And then from that really 4 to 12 range, how well are we retaining these people? Are we getting more people to stay? And really, what issues are remaining? There's a chance something like this doesn't work. Maybe the industry is just a high turnover industry. But if you're a high turnover industry and it's a problem for you, you might as well try something. And this is just something that they could try. But what other issues might remain? Are there gaps in supervisory roles? Do roles need to be reevaluated? Does having more people allow you to provide more services to what you're doing, but does it leave gaps somewhere else? Or does it expand the potential need for more services? Is it going to allow you to do more things than you were doing in the past? Those are all things that can be evaluated on that marker timeline between that really 6 and 12 month range. Did it solve the core issue? I mean, again, if not, why didn't it? Are you just a high turnover industry? Are there just not that many quality candidates out there for these specific roles? Like, these are all things that you can evaluate. But again, in order to do it, you need to try something that you might not have already been doing. And then if it does work, can it be implemented in other areas within your organization? Maybe not identically, but a similar model that allows you to really boost up what you have internally already. If you've got good workers on the inside, those are assets, and you want to try to keep them around as long as you can. But in saying that, you also have to understand that they're probably going to leave at some point, and you want to be able to fill those gaps with other high-value assets. So a plan like this could potentially help you out. If you have a lot of people, then you should be able to really move pieces internally if you can. So that's it. Nothing groundbreaking. Again, I don't think it's that amazing of a concept. I'm glad that they want to roll with it. Just recording this so that I have it out there. But we'll see. I'm curious to see where this goes as I continue to passively help with this proposal and where they ultimately want to go with it. And if it works, awesome. And that means I was right. And I get to stroke my ego a little bit. If it doesn't work, not to say that it couldn't work somewhere else, it just didn't work, or maybe it just wasn't even implemented beyond just doing the proposal. So we will see. I'm sure I will have an update to this at some point, but until then, check out the platform. Growing, working on getting others integrated into it. There will be changes going into the fall in 2024 with how we market ourselves and with overall presentation. So on that, have a good week. Hope you enjoyed the listen, and we will see you next time.